The HOA thought they could push my wife around. They believed intimidation, fake rules, and even threats would scare her into submission. What they didn't realize was that she wasn't alone. Standing at her side were Brutus and Delta, two retired military K-9s trained to face down armed combatants. So when the HOA tried to attack her, they walked straight into a fight they never expected, and one they could never win. It all began with a letter taped to our front door. My wife, Elaine, unfolded it and frowned. The HOA president, Karen, was demanding we remove the dogs immediately because, according to her, they were lowering property values. I laughed at the absurdity. Brutus, our German Shepherd, and Delta, our Belgian Malinois, weren't just pets. They were former military working dogs. I had served alongside them overseas before retiring. They were disciplined, obedient, and protective, but only when commanded. Elaine didn't laugh. She knew HOAs could make life miserable. Fines, harassment, even lawsuits. And Karen wasn't the type to back down. I told Elaine not to worry. They're family, I said, scratching Brutus behind the ears. Nobody is taking them from us. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. Karen wasn't angry about property values. She wanted control. And when people like her wanted control, they didn't stop at letters. That night, as Brutus paced by the window and Delta's ears twitched at the slightest sound, I had a sinking feeling in my gut. The fight hadn't even started yet, but it was already on its way to our doorstep. A week later, another note appeared, this time shoved under the door. It wasn't official, just a scrap of paper with 5 words scrawled in red ink, comply, or it will get worse. That's when Elaine noticed the drone. It hovered low over our backyard, buzzing like a giant mosquito. Brutus snarled, his hackles rising, while Delta tracked it with sharp eyes. I grabbed my binoculars and followed it as it drifted down, straight onto Karen's balcony. The next morning, we woke to boot prints in the dirt near our shed. Brutus barked furiously at shadows that weren't there. Elaine admitted she didn't feel safe stepping outside alone anymore. The harassment was systematic. Fake violation slips showed up in our mailbox. Our trash bins were overturned in the night. Someone even scratched the side of my truck. Karen's goal was clear: wear us down until we gave up the dogs. But she underestimated one thing: Brutus and Delta weren't ordinary pets. They were soldiers. And if Karen wanted a fight, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. It was a Tuesday afternoon when a black SUV pulled into our driveway. 4 men climbed out, clipboards in hand, wearing plain clothes but carrying themselves like enforcers. Compliance inspection, one of them barked. You're in violation of Municipal Code Section 14B. This fence has to come down immediately. Elaine, standing alone on the porch, narrowed her eyes. That's not a real code, she replied calmly. The man leaned closer, his voice dropping. Some rules aren't written down. Delta growled low from behind the screen door. Brutus stood at her side, muscles taut, eyes locked on the strangers. They didn't bark wildly. They didn't lunge. They just waited, watching, ready. Elaine held her ground. This is private property. Leave. The men smirked but didn't push further that day. Instead, they slunk back into their SUV and drove off. But Elaine knew what that meant. They'd be back. And next time, they wouldn't just bring clipboards. She stepped inside and closed the door, her hand brushing over Brutus's fur. Good boy, she whispered. But her voice trembled. The battle lines had been drawn. And my wife was standing in the crosshairs. It was Saturday morning, bright skies, children playing in the street, neighbors mowing their lawns. Elaine was kneeling in the front yard, tending to her flowers, when the sound of heavy footsteps made her look up. 4 men marched toward her, the same fake compliance officers. Only this time, they weren't even pretending to be official. Karen followed closely behind, phone in hand, recording like she was live streaming. Remove the dogs. Remove the fence. Or we remove you, one of them growled. Elaine rose slowly, dirt on her gloves, but fire in her eyes. This is private property. You're trespassing. Karen smirked. We don't need permission. HOA authorization is enough. That was a lie, and Elaine knew it. HOA rules couldn't override state law. But these men weren't here to argue codes. They were here to intimidate. Brutus and Delta padded to Elaine's side, ears forward, bodies rigid. They didn't attack. They didn't bark. They just waited for her word. Neighbors began peeking out their doors, whispering. The tension was electric, the air charged. The men stepped closer. One reached for Elaine's arm. That was the moment Brutus decided enough was enough. The first thug lunged, hand outstretched to grab Elaine. Brutus exploded into motion, faster than the eye could follow. With a controlled drive bite, he slammed into the man's chest, knocking him flat onto the pavement. Another attacker swung a metal rod at Delta. Wrong move. She dodged sideways, clamped down on his forearm, and held steady. No thrashing, no shredding, just perfect military precision, immobilizing him without tearing flesh. Call them off. Karen shrieked, her voice cracking. Delta, hold. Elaine commanded. The Malinois froze in place, jaws locked but controlled, pinning the man like a professional soldier. A third thug tried to circle around, but Brutus spun at Elaine's signal. Drive, she snapped. The Shepherd launched again, colliding with the man's midsection and sending him sprawling into the dirt. The fourth backed away, hands raised, panic written across his face. By now, neighbors had poured into the street, phones raised, recording everything. Shouts rang out, "They are trespassing. Call the cops." Karen's smirk had vanished. The perfect video she'd hoped to capture was now evidence of her own thugs getting dismantled by disciplined military dogs. And this battle was only beginning. By the time deputies arrived, Karen had already switched tactics. Tears streamed down her face as she waved her phone like evidence. "They set their attack dogs on us," she screeched. "These animals are weapons. They need to be destroyed." Her thugs groaned in the background, clutching their bruises, avoiding the deputy's eyes. Elaine clipped leashes onto Brutus and Delta. They sat obediently at her side, calm and alert. Not wild. Not dangerous. Just trained. I handed one deputy my phone. "You'll want to see this." He watched the video. The trespass, the threats, the lunge toward my wife, and the dogs responding only when necessary, only with precision. The deputy lowered the phone, jaw tight. He said, turning to Karen. "You and your associates are under investigation for criminal trespass and assault. These dogs defended their handler from an imminent threat." Karen's face crumpled. "That's not true. HOA authorization doesn't override state law," the deputy cut her off. "You had no authority to enter their yard or put your hands on anyone. Frankly, you're lucky these dogs are trained. A lesser animal could have killed someone." The crowd murmured in agreement. The tide had turned. Karen tried one last desperate card. "Then charge me, but those beasts still get put down." The deputy shook his head. "Wrong again. California law specifically exempts dogs who defend their owners from trespassers committing crimes. These animals won't face consequences. You will." Cheers erupted from the neighbors. Phones kept recording as deputies cuffed Karen and loaded her and her thugs into cruisers. Her face burned red with humiliation. Elaine knelt beside Brutus and Delta, hugging them tightly. Their tails wagged, happy to finally relax. I wrapped my arm around her. "You see that? They didn't just protect you. They exposed Karen for who she really is." Elaine smiled, fierce and proud. "They're not just dogs. They're family." That day, everything changed. The HOA's reign of intimidation crumbled. Karen's power vanished in front of the entire neighborhood. And for the first time in years, our home felt safe again. As for Brutus and Delta, they weren't just pets anymore. They were legends on our street. And anyone thinking of messing with us now? Well, they'd have to remember the hard lesson Karen learned the day she picked a fight with trained soldiers in fur.